Good afternoon or good morning, everyone, depending on where you're zooming in with us today. I'm Kaylin Burke. I'm with METALCON, and I am so excited to welcome you to today's very special edition of METALCON Online. Today's special edition is called Fire Resilience of Metal in Building Design. We have some fantastic panelists speaking with us today. First, I want to introduce our moderator, Frank Stasiowski, who is the CEO of PSNJ Resources. Then we have our panelists. We have Alan Scott of Intertech, Anush Brancasio of the Florida Office of Insurance Regulation, Dick Davis, who is a consultant, and we have Brian Partica of Carlisle Companies. Today, we are going to be talking about several different topics. Today's agenda is on the screen for anyone who is an AIA member. Just take note of that. It will be available in the YouTube that will be posted later on today as well. I am also very, very pleased to let you guys know that today's session will be under the antitrust rules. So the nature of today's webinar content brings together multiple competing businesses, and we may have multiple competing businesses with us viewing today as well. And we must address antitrust laws to ensure that we are not violating or giving the appearance of violating any of these laws. Subjects that we will avoid today are the terms and conditions of sale, prices and quotations, customers and markets, and future company plans. If anyone comments on any of these items within the chat, they will be removed immediately. And for future viewers, if anyone comments on these in the YouTube comments, they will also be removed immediately. I thank you so much for listening to that. I know it's not the most fun. Up next on May 12th, 2025, we will be having a very special webinar again, and this is discussing single-family homes. It's being presented by the Metal Architecture magazine, and it will be focused on wildfire resilience for single independent family homes, ways that they can be designed around and presented even better coming up as we rebuild from the California disasters as well. How can you get your AIA credits from today's session? Very simple. At the end of the session, you're going to receive a quick survey link. That survey link is very, very quick. It's your first, your last name, and your AIA number and your email address so we can get that credit to you. So if you do want your credit for today, it is an HSW course. Please submit it that way. If you're watching on demand, you're just going to shoot out an email and the auto download will pop up for you as well. Once again, thank you all for viewing with us today and for being here. We highly, highly encourage your commentary. So please submit any questions, comments, anything that you want to in the chat box. I'll be monitoring it, and we are very excited to have you here with us. So without further ado, I'm going to have Frank Stasiowski take it away.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us, and especially thank you to our panelists here today. You know, our objective here today is to educate, to talk about the differences in different materials as it relates to disasters. You know that what's going on in the Americas today with the amount of change that's happening with tariffs, with natural wildfires, with hurricanes, with wind, it's causing everybody to take another look at the way we put things together. Add to that the sustainability requirements that architects are looking at in terms of making sure that our projects are sustainable and can use less energy, everything happening all at once. So our objective today is to have a really lively discussion with these professional people about what happened in California, what happened with the hurricanes, what's happening with insurance, with technical stuff, with all the stuff that's going on to help you as a person listening to this gain some knowledge about your decisions in the built environment. So without, getting too much into that, I want to start out with a general question, and that is, to the panelists, and anybody can jump in. My first question is, what can we learn from what's going on out there right now in the disasters? In other words, there have been disasters as far back, in our lifetime as Hurricane Andrew, disasters, Hurricane Katrina, the wildfires in California, fires in other places, earthquakes. What can we learn about all of this from all of these things that we can put to use right now? Anybody want to jump in first?
I can, I guess. Oh, sorry. Oh, no, go ahead, Dick. I'll follow you.
Okay, I was just going to say the fact that there's been such tremendous disaster and conflagrations, especially in Southern California, it shows you that you cannot rely on at least the existing codes and standards. And we really have to, look closely at the science and figure out what materials to use, whether it's residential, commercial, or industrial construction.
That's a good point. Good point. Alan, you were going to say something there.
Yeah, I was just building on that. I think one of the key pieces is recognizing that these hazard events can happen anywhere, and it doesn't necessarily, what happened in the past is not necessarily an indicator of future occurrences, and so assessment is required. So we're seeing an increased emphasis on doing natural hazard and climate related assessments of both existing properties and pre-development or new developments to look for those things. And just one example or two examples quickly. People seemed surprised about the horrible flooding that happened in Asheville, North Carolina with Hurricane Helene. But if you looked at flood assessments for that area beyond just simple FEMA flood maps, you would see that there were significant flood risk there that we could have prepared for. And a collaborator of mine had done a resilience assessment for an apartment building in Southern California last year, and found that there were just different elements of fire risk depending upon which map you looked at. That an apartment was shown low risk in one map and high risk in another. But it burned to the ground in the recent fires, and perhaps some assessment to determine risks might have prompted some action to reduce those before hazard happened.
Yeah, Frank, I would just add great points, Alan. Climate change is really the key driver in most of this, right? You're getting storms that are stronger. They're strong in how much rain they're dumping onto us, or how much wind they're generating, or how much drought we're creating out in California. So I think climate change is something that we obviously is the key driver behind most of these tragedies that we're seeing.
One of the things that Dick mentioned was codes, and very interestingly, I think the fastest response to some of these disasters has been by the insurance companies that have increased their premiums. And it seems like it takes forever to change building codes as a result of what we learn. What do you think about that? I mean, Anush, you're in Florida, and you're a wind specialist, and you know what's going on with hurricanes. Are they changing the codes fast enough to keep up with the pace of these storms?
Well, typically for us, and I think it's on a national basis, the building code is updated every 3 years. But if I go back to Andrew,
is that fast enough?
Well, after Andrew, and Andrew was in 92, if I recall, August of 92, we had 13 insurers go insolvent. I was not here at the time. I was in law school, but I have learned quite a bit about it because I feel like history starts to repeat itself. We had a big gap after Andrew where we didn't really have any storms, but we took a lot of, our legislature took a lot of actions that I feel like California and Colorado have now had to replicate in the wildfire arena, setting up like the FAIR plans, and because we already had like a wind pool, but we had to do like a property and casualty one. After we lost so many, we had to do a moratorium, and we wouldn't let insurers leave, just to try to stabilize the market and do some things in there. And yes, rates have gone up, and we ended up, a lot of these insurers, the national insurers, created like Florida only insurers to insulate themselves from such a high risk. And we've had this problem for other reasons, other perils. I mean, it's usually hurricane, but it's, we had a big litigation issue here in Florida that our legislature has taken care of, and we're starting to see rates come down even now. Compared to other parts like California, Colorado, it's very high. And for change, Florida, we were like the lowest in rate changes in the last year because of those changes and what we're trying to make. The building codes, I think every 3 years, you have to test some of these things and go through it. So when we adopted the Florida Building Code in 2002, I think is when we went, South Florida adopted theirs and they had a really strong one. And we've seen it. I mean, I heard legislators were talking about it recently about how when they went and saw after Hurricane Ian, you saw a lot of properties still standing because they had been built after 2002 and they could withstand storms. So if you do build to resilience and you use the right things, you can withstand these storms and the catastrophes of the future. So, but I'm not an engineer, so I don't know about the building code, but I think at least we're a state that has it. Not all states have it. And so I know that's an issue. We're always, and I'm not sure what California or Colorado's stance is if they have a statewide building code, but if they don't, they probably need to start looking at one.
Well, let me ask a question and go back to Dick for a second, as a consultant in materials and a lot of this stuff here. Are the codes leaning more now toward wind resistant or fire resistant materials in general as they're updated, Dick? Or do you think they're too slow in doing it?
I wouldn't say in general. I mean, they like for wind, they basically refer to ASCE 7, and there's guidance in there. But and for the most part, they adopt that. But then when you talk about, and Anusha's correct in that things don't happen fast enough. It's every 3 years for the model code for IBC to change, but then it's up to the individual states to adopt that. And I've seen situations where, like back in when the 2015 code came out, some states were still using the 2003. That's how back, and they can make exception to certain code requirements at the local level. But it's, and people need to remember that code requirements are minimum. They're minimum requirements. There's nothing wrong with exceeding those requirements, whether it be fire, wind, hail, flood, whatever. And in some cases, they can up the game without increasing the costs, proportionately. They can, modest increases in cost can give you great benefit and resistance to the various perils that could attack the building.
All right, let me shift a little bit. I want to
May I
get
jump
Brian
in quickly, Frank?
Go ahead, Alan.
Yeah, I just really quickly, Dick, I'm glad you said that because I think that's such an important point that codes are a minimum. I love the Randy Croxton, the architect way back in the 90s, said, when you say you build a building to code, it means if you made it any worse, it'd be against the law. And I think it's important to emphasize that it is part of the architect's standard of care to understand the hazards that a building might face over its life and inform their clients about it. So even if that requires going beyond code, it's important to look at those current and future hazards that the code may not have caught up with, and consider those cost-effective ways to go beyond code.
There's one story that I heard on the news a couple of weeks ago about a family in Pacific Palisades whose house was untouched by the fire, basically survived the fire. But they wanted to renovate some of the exterior of the house or do some cosmetic things, and they were told they can't have a building permit for 2 years because the infrastructure is not connected to supply them water, electricity, any of the services in the neighborhood. So they've got to delay all building permits for 2 years. So it almost doesn't matter what our minimum code is for a structure if the infrastructure is destroyed. And make that point. Now, I want to get to another question for Brian here. As a manufacturer of metal in this industry, tell us how metal fits into all of this. Have you seen a change in codes?
Well, I think, Frank, if you think about the building codes over the last 6 cycles, we had a very, very strong focus on cool roofing back in 2012, 2016. 2020 was wrapped around carbon neutrality and reduction of carbon in buildings. And now 2024 seems to be the theme is resilience. And when you tie that all back to metal, metal is a component. Obviously, metal roof would be a wonderful solution for areas that are prone to fire and wind and hail. Will they dent and hail? For sure, they'll dent and hail. But the challenge is that, you know, how do you fix them after they get dented? That's an area that we're focused on to try to make it an improved process. But I would say this, you know, the metal roof is going to have a Class A fire rating. And if you look at some of the new standards that are being passed, some of the neighborhood standards, there's a wildfire prepared neighborhood program by IBHS right now that basically lays out kind of how you're going to format the neighborhood. And metal roofs are mentioned in that, right, as a non-combustible Class A fire rated. However, they're mentioned where you have to have a certain test required, and you can't be classified by report, which is a change for something that is UL was, hey, if somebody else passed it, I could classify my product as well. So they're requiring actual testing. I think where metal fits in is obviously you're going to have you know, the debate of a passive home or a non-passive home, which means that do you vent the system to allow air to flow in through the system, or do you close that off and make sure that you have no ability for embers to enter in? So metal roofs play a great role in the success of living through a fire. There's a home in Palisades that had a metal roof on it with some solar and had concrete barrier all the way around it and gravel everywhere, and it seemed to survive. But it's not the end all be all. And I don't want to oversell the benefits of metal roofs, although I would love to. I don't want to say this is the cure and everybody should have a metal roof. I think it will help to eliminate some of the possibilities of ignition. And I think that's really important when you start talking about metal as a benefit of a product.
Dick,
Right.
is there more testing going on in metal?
Well, let me say that there is a requirement pretty much everywhere for testing exterior exposure, fire exposure to roof covers. And that test is ASTM E108 or UL 790, which is the same test. And to kind of piggyback off of what Brian's saying, if you go back decades, the codes have more or less grandfathered or waived the tests for certain types of materials that are inherently non-combustible and have had good history. And that would include concrete or clay tile, but also certain types of metal roofs, copper or ferrous sheets or shingles. So, and the thing to remember is, as much as aluminum has some very good properties, that is not grandfathered from the testing. The melting temperature of aluminum is about 900 to 1200 degrees Fahrenheit, whereas copper is approximately 2000 degrees Fahrenheit, and steel's north of 2600 degrees Fahrenheit. The actual flame temperatures vary from 1000 to 2000 degrees if you get direct flame impingement. So yes, the copper and the steel sheets and the steel shingles would do very well in the fire, as well as concrete clay
Well,
tile.
now let me ask you a question for both Dick, I mean, for Alan and Anus here, from two perspectives. Alan, do you think enough architects are aware of these tests on materials? Or do you think they're specifying materials that are easier to get approved as opposed to having to require a test? That's one question for you. And then I want to come to Anus.
Generally, architects aren't aware enough about resilience issues and where it is that they need to go beyond what they've done, you know, for the last 20, 30 years. And so I think that there needs to be greater awareness among the design community about all the different standards and tests associated with materials and assemblies to make buildings more resilient.
Yeah, so by default, that would mean that the materials that don't get tested tend to be used more, even if some of them are not fire resistant. True? Would you agree?
Yeah, I think that's true.
Yeah, which is unfortunate. So Anus, coming to you, from an insurance perspective or from a code perspective in Florida, you know, are you seeing more use of materials that don't require testing or materials that do require testing in Florida?
I wouldn't. I'm not sure about that.
I can
I was
answer
gonna say
that
if
one.
somebody else can answer that one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I got that
Yeah,
one.
right.
I think one of the successes in Florida has been their Florida product approval system. Frank. We have, as manufacturers, have to list our products in the state of Florida to a minimum standard. So we have to meet certain wind criterias, and then that above and beyond that, you have Dade County, which has a whole nother set of standards. And they enforce that code approval at permitting. So they know what to do when it comes to, hey, I should approve this product because it's already gone through the testing and all the submissions that are required. And you can go on the floridaproductapproval.com and search any manufacturer's products that meet that building code that can be used. You don't have that code approval or that number, then guess what? You're not going to be able to sell your products in the state of Florida to be used for.
Now, do you think the same thing should apply to California moving forward?
California's got California, yes, I do. I think California has a program called WUI, which is the Wildfire Urban Interface. It's CAL FIRE sponsored, so it's state sponsored, and but it's whether or not it's being enforced at the local level, Frank, is I don't know the answer to that. I don't think it is. I know there's been an executive order to eliminate permitting for rebuilds because they're trying to eliminate all the red tape, which is wonderful. And as I sit in Pennsylvania, I can't sit here and say, I'm so sorry that happened to the folks in California, and I can't imagine what they're going through. But I'm also concerned that if there's no policing of the products being used, they're going to create the same problem by just getting buildings up quickly and not doing it in the right way. And but
this comes to
again,
another.
for me sitting here in Pennsylvania, it's easy for me to say that, not having my house burnt down. So I don't want to sound that I'm not sensitive to the fact that these folks are dealing with quite a bit, and I understand the need to get buildings built quickly.
Sure. Now, Alan, coming to you with the AIA committees, I mean, is there discussion of this type going on in the committees about how to get the codes more streamlined or the testing more streamlined, and more materials used that are resistant to some of these disasters?
Yeah, and first I'll go back and say I agree, Brian, with the value of the material approval like the state of Florida has, and I think that more states should have that type of thing. And I am concerned, while I'm sympathetic with the need to reduce speed of rebuilding, I think it's really important that after every hazard that you rebuild more resilient than you were before. But Frank, to your question, yes, although I'm not fully as an outside volunteer with AIA, I'm not fully aware of every aspect, but I know that the American Institute of Architects is very active and working on both codes and product standards, and is very focused on both resilience and sustainability aspects relative to those things nationally. So there's a lot of effort going on at the state and federal level.
Well, this is a great group. I mean, you guys represent all the different factions that need to come together to have a discussion around this. And what I wonder and what I kind of feel is that each group is doing their own thing, but I wonder whether representatives from all the groups are together. Are the insurance groups, Anus, talking with the architects, or are they simply talking with other insurance people about how to deal with premiums and risk and things of that sort? Because, and similar, Dick, are the testing companies talking with the insurance people in order to try to get the insurance people to understand the ramifications of the test? Where is there a joint group of people like you guys that's talking about this problem?
Well, I can speak a bit to that, Frank.
Yeah.
I represented FM for many years on a lot of different NFPA committees and SFP and ASCE. And generally the committees are balanced. So you have so many people, depending, you may not have a lot of people from the insurance industry represented, but you have so many manufacturers, so many consultants, so many people from other industries, building officials, et cetera, et cetera. So the committees are supposed to be balanced so that one faction can't stack the deck.
Okay.
But a lot of times, I like to talk about the science and the history of what's happened. But then you have other people that have their opinions, and it may be more cost related or market share, and sometimes you know, the rest of the committee or the majority of the committee gets waived, and what ends up happening and going in the codes or standards is not the best from a science standpoint.
Okay.
So
And I was
Well,
gonna
economics,
I just
follow the money, right? News, follow the money.
yeah. Well, I was gonna say we, at least in Florida, I just kind of wanted to circle back. There were some things said throughout that I think we have done on the wind side, and we do offer discounts. That was one of the things that um, after Andrew, it started out just as shutter discounts. And as we learned more and the building code came into place, then we offered discounts relating to the roof coverings, connections, and it all had to be at least to the minimum standard of the building code. So obviously, if you have a new house, it's going to do that. But we have such a huge population of homes that are built before the code. So it's a lot about getting your roof replaced, or if you're going to do a rebuild or renovation, then you can get credits. So there is some incentives there for wind. And I know that California is the first state to mandate credits because ours are mandated. We pass them. Other insurers can do their own study because it's a pretty costly study, and if they want to kind of do it for their book. But we do that. And we've just done an updated study, and we're in the process of updating ours. And we've even broken out metal roofs. And from what I could tell and look at the standards that Applied Research Associates did our study, that it seems the metal roofs compared to some of the other roofs would get a higher credit, given their
For fire,
um,
for fire or for
for
wind?
wind
For
right now
wind.
for us
Mm.
for so I'm just saying that we do that for the wind portion. Now I've seen like USAA, when I was doing some research to learn about wildfire credits, it looks like some of the individual companies have been offering credits of some kind, whether it's based on a community basis or an individual basis. There's two that, it's wildfire is a different animal than the hurricane. You can just do your own home and you can get a credit. Some of the insurers will offer a credit if you're in a Firewise community or a shelter-in-place community in California. Or they'll also maybe offer, if you do stuff around your house to clear the debris, have the space, fire breaks and stuff like that, that they can offer individual discounts as well. So there are some ways to start to get some discounts, but some companies have offered them for years. But recently, California, I think it was in 22, passed a statute that I think they finally got their rule in place recently to address this and mandate wildfire discounts. I think there's been some criticism that they're a little low, but I think it's just going to take some time to show that some of these techniques and other actually will make a difference in a wildfire
Let me jump
situation.
in here for a second and ask a question, because I want to take the position of the people that are listening to this broadcast right now. And I'm sure there are a lot of people out there that are both installers or manufacturers or even consumers who may have lost a home. And we're talking about a whole array of things. What do they do to get information about this? I mean, where should I go if I'm a consumer? If I've lost my house in Pacific Palisades, and I want to now, have a house that's more resilient, that's more fireproof, and I want to get knowledge about this, where would you suggest to that person to go right now? Because I don't think they're getting the information from the code office in California. And, this is a very helpful discussion amongst all of you. But if you're one of those people out there, or if you're an installer, let's say I'm a metal roof installer, where do I go to get help to get my roof either approved or in? Dick?
I was going to just say real quick for the insurance side, Commissioner Lara has like some good pages on the California Department of Insurance website that will connect you to different organizations in California. And if you're insured, I would also tell to speak with your insurance agent, because a lot of these insurance companies are starting to participate, and they have to offer discounts so they can tell you how you could try to build to get those discounts.
Now, is that before you go to your architect, before you go to your builder? Do you do that first?
I would do it first.
yes.
Okay, Dick?
I was going to say a couple of things that are Well, FM has a public data sheet 9-19 on wildfire exposure. So if you go to the website and register, you can access that for free. That has guidance. It's not a requirement. It's just recommended practice, but anyone can follow it if they choose. The other organization that's done a lot of work is IBHS, or the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety. They're headquartered out of Tampa, and they've done a lot of research on this, looking at the whole envelope, including things like, soffit details and the mesh on a soffit vent, that it should be stainless steel so it doesn't melt or corrode, but you should also have very small openings, like 1/16 of an inch, so you don't get burning embers that get inside an attic space and burn the building down. Some of IBHS's information may be available for free on their website. Other stuff may be available to members, but you'll have to check with them.
Just going to add. Well, yeah, I agree, Dick. The IBHS is a great resource for information on multiple hazards, fire and wind and such. The AIA California and the U.S. Green Building Council have both recently published documents that pull in great recommendations that are easily understood by homeowners and would help in a conversation before they start working with design and construction professionals. So there are some other free resources from both of those organizations.
Let me ask you a question, Brian, of you in the manufacturing business, which is a very interesting question. The word innovation. When I hear all this discussion going on about the restrictions on codes and the things you have to do to get things approved and the testing and everything else, does this spawn innovation or does it restrict innovation?
No, it spawns innovation, Frank. And one of the things that we focused on is stop selling the product and sell the assembly, right? So for us, it's a matter of stop talking about a metal roof and let's talk about a fire-resistant underlayment product with a 2-hour burn rate that is part of our assembly. How do we tighten up the eaves and the soffits with ember? We have this ember mesh product that we use on our Z closures, if it's ventilated, to not let the embers in. So there's a lot of innovation happening. We have a 2-hour fire-rated wall insulation product that's made of denim jeans, old recycled denim jeans. So it's pretty awesome to watch the innovation that happens as a result of it.
But doesn't that all have to be approved too? I mean, and now you got to go through the testing process and then the code process. So is innovation going to slow down the rebuilding or is it going to speed up the rebuilding?
Well, I think there are products that are commercially available today that have been tested already, Frank. So I think, our pipeline is very solid when it comes to innovative products that will help to solve some of the challenges that folks are going to face with rebuilding. I would say and caution everybody on the call that I don't think that rebuilding is going to happen right away either, right? They're cleaning up soil right now. There's a lot happening in California. I think I don't remember the number, but it was less than 12 homes have been rebuilt in Maui since those fires. So there's a lot of things that need to happen before the rebuilding starts. And our job as a manufacturer is to be prepared when that time comes and again, there's laws in place that we're not going to price gouge. We're literally trying to gather as much information as possible today so we can learn from this disaster to try to offer solutions that will help folks in the future to avoid this from happening again and again and again. And it's spreading. It's not only in California. I mean, I watched the news this morning. There's red flag warnings in New Mexico today, right? Huge droughts in New Mexico. State of Montana's got a bill on their desk right now called HB 136 that will mandate by law through the state that insurance companies must offer a premium reduction for people that are building using non-combustible building products. So this is just, California is obviously that disaster is terrible and we want to learn from that. What's that?
No, you froze for a second, so we missed that.
Oh, okay.
Part of that comment. Now I know in terms of the insurance, one of the things that happened in California is you had a couple of companies actually pull out of the property insurance business in California, and the law is now being changed to mandate that they come back in. But, I mean, what's the position of the insurance companies on this? Because they've lost a lot of money to a lot of these natural disasters. What do you think the future holds for insurance as it relates to this discussion?
Well, I know from what I understand, the change there was a lot of changes instituted in California by Commissioner Lara to um, modernize the way an insurance company can make a rate filing. I believe because of the Proposition 103, I think is what I heard in the past, has kind of limited their ability to allow insurers to use modeling and other factors that they can use in Florida. Um, that they're making it that they've expanded it, so there are insurers willing to come back now. They may have also done the what we had done after Andrew, as far as saying you can't leave, because you want to try to keep everybody insured for other risks. Now, those that are total losses right now, there's not much they can do, but you don't want people pulling out of other areas that have not been affected and kind of put everybody into your insurer of last resort, what we usually call a FAIR plan. Ours is called Citizens. Colorado just started theirs this year because they needed it because of the wildfires. So I think California is doing what they can to try to keep insurers from leaving and bringing them back when it comes to now. Again, that might translate in higher rates because it is now they're learning how risky it is, and but they are mandating discounts, and so there have been discounts in there. I think what I saw, the most recent one that was been in the news has been like State Farm, and it's about a 6% discount. But I think over time, when you see how effective some of these, products and techniques are that go through a future wildfire, not that you wanted to, but that's usually what it takes. That's what it's taken. But people like see homes still standing after hurricane saying, see, this works. When you build to resilience and you use the stronger codes, they stand so these people can get back in their homes faster. But we had some,
I'm
I was
going
going
to
to
jump
say,
in for a second
okay.
because one of the things that you prompt me to think about here is the fact that we as an industry, whether we're architects, builders, insurers, we tend to think of buildings as something that's going to be around for a long time. You put a house up, you put a building up, it's going to be around for 100 years. But what about the whole movement toward temporary structures, modular homes, small houses, things of that sort? Alan, are you having any discussion on that as a potential solution to get things built faster? We have a manufacturer, for instance, those small, tiny metal homes, almost modular homes that can be put onto a site in rapid order. Any discussion on that as a potential solution to some of this?
Well, I've heard the tiny home movement has been more focused on things like addressing homelessness and that crisis, getting people who don't have any shelter into something, and so I've seen it more in that regard. I have seen both promising innovations and some logistical challenges with innovations around panelized and volumetric modular offsite construction. Generally, I'm a proponent of that as a resource efficient, labor efficient, and speedier way to build buildings, and multifamily housing in particular is something that that type of construction lends itself to. So I think it is part of the solution. It doesn't work everywhere for everyone, and there are some challenges, but I'm bullish on
Going back to what Brian
volumetric
said,
modulars.
yeah, going back to what Brian said about overall systems as opposed to individual products. Dick, have you seen any of the systems for tiny homes tested as a complete structure?
I have not gotten involved with tiny homes. When I worked for FM, we had most of our clients were very large. So I don't have any exposure. But one thing you can certainly, if you use the right materials, you could build anything to any size. The thing that I'd probably be most concerned about with a tiny home is how do you anchor it so the whole structure doesn't get blown over. and a severe wind event, or a design wind event, actually. That would be probably the first concern that sticks in my mind with the tiny homes.
Well, the news coming to that in Florida, where you've got all the wind, and you think about the trailer homes that were wiped out during the hurricanes. What's the insurance position on that? Like, you don't insure trailers?
Well, we still have a mobile home, that's still available. They have to have tie down. I mean, there's like a tie down program we have to try
Okay.
to help them and tie down. But I think if it was me, I'd probably still want to make sure I would go to the shelter.
One type of disaster that we haven't talked about occurred in Florida, and that's the collapse of that building in Miami, which is having a dramatic impact on insurance of high rises across Florida and of homeowner associations that are struggling with, multi-unit structures that are over 3 stories high. Can you comment on that a little bit in terms of your knowledge, English?
Well, I know there's been some changes and I know there's some bills currently going through. I don't know whether they'll pass. We're kind of in our 6th week, I guess, of our 8-week legislative term. But they're, kind of, I think the problem that was kind of exposed with the Surfside collapse, is that homeowners associations have to start assessing in advance. There's things you have to do over time with some of these condos that are on the water and getting exposure. And it seemed like, at least for Surfside, I guess they kept kicking the can down. So now the legislature has passed rules that require all our homeowners associations, all the mobile condo associations, to get they have to, I think it's an every 5-year inspection, and if they have to take care of everything, or take care of any of the issues that are identified, and they have to build up a reserve. So building up that reserve account has been causing a lot of consternation, and it's costing a lot of money on top of insurance rates kind of going up. And so we're looking at different things to try to help with that process.
All right, so let me jump in, and we've got about 5 more minutes that we can go here. And in looking at this overall discussion, I want to have each of you frame a comment about what you think the outcome of this will be in terms of these natural disasters. I mean, we're all witnessing this. The whole society is seeing it. We've got global warming and non-global warming. We've got more hurricanes, more collapses. And it seems like, when I talk about the word innovation, are we slowing it or speeding it? We can debate that, but the overall impact of all of these disasters seems to prompt change in what we're doing to build buildings in all kinds of ways that we're talking about. So if you had advice to these listeners about what to do now, how to monitor this change that's going on in the code, all the way from the codes all the way up to building materials, what's the best advice you could give people? And who's at the head of it? I mean, is it the manufacturers like Brian that are promoting innovation, or is it the codes that are looking for new ways to do things? Dick, you've dealt with a lot of materials. Any thoughts on this?
Well, I don't like to put too much reliance on waiting for the codes to change and solve all the problems, because I haven't seen it happen in 50 years, so I'm not going to start hoping for it now. But if you have someone who's a celebrity in Southern California and they want to build a 5, 10, $20 million house, I would tell them to first engage a fire protection engineer and a structural engineer to give him some guidance on if he's going to spend that kind of money on a house, how to build something that's actually going to last. It's going to cost them a little bit more, but you can probably afford it and you can probably appreciate it before he even goes to an architect, because unfortunately the architects lack the experience in fire protection engineering, and they also lack experience in a lot of cases in structural design. So, and those are my two specialties for the last 50 years. So that's my 2 cents.
He just attacked the architects. Alan, you want to defend the architects? Say anything about that?
Architects, I think that what Dick said is right. Architects are generalists, and the best ones understand the value of engineers and others and bring their elements into the design. So I think that architects need to step up and start engaging and listening to those other engineering and fire protection experts as part of their um, work. I think that some architects are doing that better than others, and we all could learn more from that process. One of the things I will do to defend architects in terms of creative problem solving and broader thought, I'm going to pick up on something brilliant that Brian said earlier and expand on it. He talked about not just talking about single materials and testing, but thinking about whole systems. Whether we're talking about fire resistance or hurricanes or floods, designing buildings that have a overall greater sustainability, like designing for passive house type standards with that don't require ventilation, so you don't have to worry about the embers getting in, and have rain screen exteriors that are protected against fire embers, and with non-combustible siding, means that you're both resilient against those hazard events, and a lot of times in hazard events, there's power outages, and then you've got issues about uninhabitable interiors. And so you've got an interior that has passive survivability and allows people to remain in the building even during a power outage. And even when the hazards don't happen, then you've got a building that's less expensive to operate, uses lower utilities, and has a lower carbon emission. So I think that that's what architects should be doing, is enlisting experts to help them to put together comprehensive buildings that address both the sustainability and the resilience issues.
Good point. Now, let me ask you another question and maybe switch gears for the last time here. Given all of this, and given what's going on with our government these days with tariffs and looking overseas, are we ahead or behind of the rest of the world when it comes to response to natural disasters? Is there innovation going on in other places around the world that's ahead of us? Or are we the leader in terms of responding to this kind of disaster? Any of the disasters we've mentioned. What do you think? What are your thoughts on that?
I could speak to the wind part of it, and I think that we're ahead of most of the rest of the world with regard to wind design. I know we have, when I worked at FM, we had clients all over the world, and I've done a lot of tests on different roof assemblies from even Asia, where there's a lot of tropical cyclone prone region in Asia, and they're really just starting to catch up with some of our design techniques that we've improved over the last 3+ decades since Hurricane Andrew with wind design. In Europe, generally Europe's not considered hurricane prone, so they don't pay as much attention to wind design as we do in the United States, where we have a lot of hurricane prone regions, particularly along the Gulf Coast and East Coast.
What about fire?
Fire, I don't know. I think I will say this, they use a lot of mineral wool insulation in Asia, which is good. It's a better fire performer than a lot of the other insulations that are on the market. So I'll give them a star for that one. But you know, there are some differences in that we have our own ASTM tests that we follow in the US, and they generally tend to follow ISO fire tests in Europe and Asia. So they may be a little different, and we don't always agree on what's the best test. But I think the biggest difference is in wind.
Good. All right, let me ask you each now as we wrap up, because we've got about 3 more minutes here before we wrap up, to make a comment from your perspective on this discussion. Was it a good discussion? Anything we need to do further? What can we do as an industry? As I led off this whole panel, I said that one of the jobs we have as an industry is to communicate information more effectively to all the constituents. both the users and the people who are putting these buildings together in every way, shape, or form, and the insurers. And I'll echo that. I really do think we've got a communication issue here to get a lot of this knowledge that you guys have mentioned out to people around the world. And hopefully we at METALCON can help that happen over the course of time. So any comments from you? Anybody want to start? Dick?
Yeah, I just say we had a pretty good discussion. We talked a bit about roofing. I can't elaborate enough on if you're trying to protect a structure from wildfire exposure, you have to look at the entire building envelope. If that fire gets inside the building, no matter how it gets in there, you could destroy the whole building. And we also talked about the walls being non-combustible. One of the things that people overlook is the windows. And, especially residential buildings, you can have a lot of windows. Ordinary annealed glass is the amount of heat energy it takes to break it and violate it and get something fire inside the building is less than the amount of heat energy it would take to ignite wood. So you definitely don't want to use annealed glass. There is fire rated glass that's available. If someone wants to spend the money, you have fire rated glass will stay in place. And also you have insulated glass that will actually limit heat transmission through the window like a firewall would. It has a special type of gel between the layers of glass, and there's limitations. Maybe you could buy in Southern California. I think you can't use it below 15 degrees Fahrenheit. But then there's also tempered glass does pretty well, especially double layered tempered glass. It'll take a lot higher heat flux than anneal glass. And if you have a double layer, we've run tests when I worked at FM, you could crack the outside layer. You're going to build up the pressure in between the layers and cause the outer layer to fail. But the inner layer will stay intact longer. Not as good as fire rated glass, but and also the window, they talk about a system, it's got a window frame. If you can get a steel frame window, that's great. I've seen them advertised at trade shows. The vinyl is not going to hold up well in a fire. It's got a relatively low melting temperature. If you have steel frame reinforcement inside the vinyl, that's going to be more resistant to the
You're
window.
reinforcing the whole concept that Brian put out of a system. Look at the
Yes.
entire system, and I agree with that. Any other comments from any of you about this entire discussion?
So Frank, I think
Brian,
just
go ahead.
from my side, can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think we really need to trust the building science, and we don't know what we don't know yet from how these buildings will be rebuilt. But what I can tell you is that the IBHS is doing some really solid work when it comes to ember intrusion and understanding what's going on with the building during a fire event, real world kind of stuff, which is really awesome. The other thing is there's still research being done regarding the spread of these fires and the wildfires, how they're creating their own atmospheric pressures, and they're looking for available oxygen because they suck oxygen out of the atmosphere. So guess where the oxygen lives? In your home. So it pulls that and pushes that fire into, because it's just looking for available oxygen. So there's a lot of things that you talked about modular homes a little bit. There's a program called the buildlainitiative.org. It's the buildlainitiative.org. There's a whole bunch of good science in there about what's going on and what we should be thinking about. There's a whole chapter on building modular to help with labor savings and cost per square foot. So there's a lot of good things happening. This is not all, it's terrible, obviously, but there is a lot of good that will come out of this and a lot of learnings that will come out of this. I think the insurance industry has to do a little bit. I'm teeing this up for you, Anush, but the insurance industry's got to rebuild some trust in how they insure buildings and homes, and then partner with communities and cities and states.
Anush, comment?
Yeah, I will step in and say I think you see more of it for the wildfire. California is the first one. I think I've seen Colorado trying to do some bills. There's the Montana bill mentioned. Idaho had some bills in the legislature this year, and it's around the discount. I think some of the stuff is it's doing like what we did is like once we got that building code in place, we're like, okay, we want to make sure if we're going to ask our consumers and our residents to do this, they need to get something back to help offset it. So I know Colorado's done some different things. They also have some kind of tax credit stuff for resilience there, but I expect that to come along. Like I said, there's been insurers for a long time already offering things. Like definitely USA has at least discounts in 10 states for wildfires, where it's the states that have it's a higher risk. Florida, it's not one of the perils that although we've had them, it definitely doesn't outweigh the hurricane risk here. So I think the insurance industry has heard it, and they're definitely at the table in California, Colorado, and hopefully with more resiliency and more building and more information that those states can generate discounts and other savings for consumers that will build to a higher standard.
All right, Alan, another comment, and then I'll wrap it up.
Build on and saying yes to everything that the other panelists have said. I totally agree. And I think that part of this is about talking to each other and coordination and integration at all levels. And I go back to the Swiss cheese model that I think I first heard about during the pandemic, but it applies perfectly here. Any single slice of Swiss cheese is a solution. It's got holes in it. It's not perfect, but you stack up enough slices and you cover up the holes and it works. So it's state and local policy and codes. It's urban and regional planning and zoning, infrastructure, community issues like Firewise communities, and then down to the building science on the home and careful attention to materials and material science. So all of those layers have to fit together to create the complete package of resilience.
Good. Well, I'll conclude by saying I think, METALCON and we at PSMJ and the Metal Construction Association, we have a role in this, and our role is to keep this communication going. Because I think it takes all aspects of the building industry to number one, learn as much as we can about these disasters, and number two, implement some of the change that you've all talked about. So I want to thank each and every one of you for your contribution. Been a very interesting hour. I've learned a lot, and I trust that all the attendees who have listened to this have learned a lot. And if they have any questions, Kaylin will supply your details to the people who have been out there. And you may get some questions as follow-up questions. Please respond quickly to the constituents. And we hope we see you all at METALCON this fall at the annual show. So thank you all, and have a good day. Kaylin, I turn it back to you.
Thank you so much, Frank. Thank you so much to everyone on this panel for joining us. We hope that every single one of you who is viewing today and every one of you participating will be able to join us at METALCON later on this year, October 21st through the 23rd of October 2025 in Las Vegas, Nevada at the Las Vegas Convention Center. We are so incredibly grateful to everyone who's been here, from our panelists, Dick Davis, Alan Scott, Anush Brancasio, Brian Partica, and our moderator, Frank Stasiowski. Thank you all so much. Thank you to all of our viewers. Again, your AIA credits and any other certificates that you may need will be popping up immediately following this webinar. If you are watching via YouTube, it's going to pop up immediately after that too. If you have any issues, please reach out to me directly. I'm Kaylyn, K-A-L-Y-N, at metalcon.com. I'll make sure you get the credits that you need. Without further ado, thanks to everyone for joining us. We appreciate you all, and I'll see you at the next METALCON online. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Everybody.
Bye.